I know what it's like to go to the gym for the first time, not know what to do, what exercises to do, how to use the machines, kind of feel like you're gonna embarrass yourself. To think about all these grunting gym bros in their packs of 2s and 3s trying to show off how heavy they can lift and draw attention to themselves, and you just don't want to be in that environment. Look, I get it. I was there just like you. So in this video, we're going to go into how to navigate the gym as a total newbie and basically get started like a pro. So hit the subscribe button. Let's get into it. The first thing to consider is gym anxiety and gym bros, because a lot of people that have never been to the gym or they're kind of afraid to get started. One of the things that they're dealing with is this anxiety about showing up and, you know, making a fool of yourself, or just they have this idea of the gym as a place full of like American high school jocks. You know, that stereotype of that like wannabe macho, just bully douchebag. They do exist, I guess. The majority of people that go to the gym, they're just people that want to look better or they want to get healthier, and they're actually mostly nice guys. Let's be honest, the real bad men, they're not hitting your commercial gyms. They're hitting the gym in other areas or just up to bad shit. They're not in your local gym. Those guys are actually nice guys and they would love to help you out. In fact, just understand that. And like anything else, when you're a beginner, you actually have to go through that process of not knowing what you're doing, kind of embarrassing yourself, making mistakes. That's just the process of learning. So you got to shift your focus from how can I not make a fool of myself to how can I actually just get through the beginner stage as fast as possible and appreciate that beginner stage, because it's just a part of growth. Right? If you're good at something and I asked you, how did you get good? As a beginner, are you going to make mistakes? What are you going to say? You'll be like, I mean, yeah. So apply the same thing to the gym. Next, what do you do as a total gym noob? The first thing, you got over gym anxiety. You started showing up. You got your membership. How often do you train? Let's just get that out the way. You want to train 3 to 4 times a week. Especially as a beginner, what you want is to build consistency. You want to make this gym thing a part of your long-term lifestyle that is manageable, that doesn't seem too stressful, that you like have to do it and get bored and exhausted. You don't want to be in that stage. Instead, you want to be in a stage where gym, you start looking forward to it. You start actually like thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to go tomorrow. And the perfect sweet spot for that is actually 3 to 4 times. Any more, you're driving yourself to burnout. And you have to be careful, especially when you first get started. You know, the beginner's enthusiasm, where in whatever activity you get started, you're a beginner, you're just like, oh my God, this is so great. And the motivation carries you into deep waters. It makes you train too hard, too much. It makes you go crazy over that one thing, and then you fizzle out, you burn out. I've seen this so many times. Don't make this mistake. Train 3 to 4 times a week. How long? No more than 1 hour. Okay, easy to remember. Just stick to this one. He said don't train for more than an hour. Don't be in there doing 2 hours per session, for the same reason that I just mentioned. Next, progressive overload. This is probably the most important concept that you need to understand as a beginner and even as an intermediate, because a lot of people have a very vague idea of progressive overload. They start to think, oh, you know, I have to like progress, I have to get stronger. So if I lift heavier weights, that means I'm progressing. It's very vague. Progressive overload just means you do 1 rep more or you do a higher weight of a certain exercise. And you can only get really specific on it if you start tracking your workouts. So you want to track those workouts and see how many sets and how many reps you do for each exercise, and just try to be better than what you did last time. Be better than the you of yesterday, rather than trying to compare yourself to these random other guys who are lifting bigger weight, right? I used to do this where I'd just be like, I wonder when I will be able to do that weight. A lot of people in the gym, by the way, all the people that you think know what they're doing, they don't actually know what they're doing. They're really confused, and they've been on that weight doing that same thing, wondering why it doesn't work for months and months. Literally 90+% of people are in that space. They're stuck. They made some progress and they're stuck on that general level. They never broke through it, and they're wondering why isn't it working. If you have a structured system where you actually apply progressive overload and just get better than you of last time by doing 1 more rep on an exercise, by increasing the weight just slightly, but you're just progressing incrementally each time, you will suddenly surpass a lot of these guys that don't have a system and don't know what they're doing. Next, fundamental exercises. What you have to understand, there are two kind of exercises in the gym. There's compound exercises and there's isolation exercises. There's free weight exercises and there's machine exercises. How do you navigate yourself? Just remember the 80-20 rule. 80% of your results come from 20% of the things you do. So the bulk of your gains, the bulk of your muscle, the bulk of your physique is gonna come from compound movements rather than isolation, and from free weight exercises rather than machines. Okay, that's not to say don't use machines, don't do isolations. Think of it kind of like if you look at a plate of food, the compound exercises like the bench press and the pull-ups, this makes up like the steak. The isolation exercises are like the little potato on the side. Next, recovery, fatigue, and failure. I'm gonna batch these all in one. Recovery is one of the most important things. It's as important as training. The biggest beginner to intermediate mistake is not prioritizing recovery or giving enough importance to recovery. And recovery is done with your diet, with your sleep, but also just being in a restful state, just chilling out, okay? Not being constantly hyper to go to gym all the time, and not exhausting yourself in the gym and going to failure. You see how fatigue and failure, these two things are connected with recovery? When you overly fatigue yourself mentally with super heavy squats and deadlifts, or by just training to failure all the time, what that's going to do is it's going to make recovery that much harder, right? Which means your muscles aren't growing because they need to fully recover. That's how they get stronger. And if you don't recover fully over a sufficient period of time, that's when burnout happens. That's when you get to a point where you're like, I don't even know why I do this, right? And then you're like, oh, maybe it's just not for me, like these gym bros. It's not the gym bros, it's not your genetics, it's not you, none of that. It's because you didn't prioritize recovery, you didn't think long term, and you probably trained until extreme fatigue, and you trained to failure. You know, when you're like and your friend helps you do the last 5 reps and you feel like you're just pumped up like crazy. You go home and you feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're like, oh my god, that was such a sick workout. 2 weeks in, you give up. And 90% of people do that. Don't do that. Instead, opt for the minimalist framework where you think long term and you actually rest. You could do more, but you leave the gym. Crazy, huh? That's when you start to look forward to the gym. Next, cardio. I got a whole like video dedicated to the best way to do cardio, the smartest way to do cardio. Check that out. Do not do cardio in the form of like high intensity running or football or basketball or baseball, volleyball. Don't do that before your strength training, because when you're working out in the gym, you want all your energy and your focus to be able to lift heavy. And cardio before is just going to make you exhausted mentally and physically. So you won't be able to perform at your best. Doing cardio immediately after is also ill-advised for the reasons I just talked about: recovery, fatigue, and failure. You don't want to be doing cardio immediately after the workout, despite what almost all the PTs in commercial gyms like prescribe you, right? They're like, do 30 minutes of running afterwards and then it burns fat. I prefer to do cardio like hours after weight training if it's a sport I really love and I don't want to miss it. But most of the time I try to do my cardio on the days that I'm not strength training in the gym, right? So if I do Tuesday, Thursday, Friday gym, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is when I do jiu-jitsu. Sort it out like that. Next, final point is ego and expectation. When you first get started in the gym, as a gym noob, the ego gets involved. You get the newbie gains. You start putting on muscle and getting shape faster than anyone else because it's called the newbie gain. When you first start anything, in the first 20 hours of doing something, you get a lot of that fast progress and you get hooked, you get motivated, and either you just try too hard and rush to burnout like I talked about, or your ego gets involved. You start to think, I want to do better than that guy. I want to lift heavier and heavier. You start to go too fast. You start to sacrifice your form because you want to do the pull-up, because you want to do the extra thing. You don't go fully down to your chest when you do the bench press. You don't extend fully down when you do the pull-up. You start trying to take shortcuts because of ego. What that does is it actually slows down your progress and it actually increases the risk of injury. Now, injury is the worst thing that you can do because injuries, they not only stop your progress, they kind of just make you depressed and feel like you shouldn't go back to the gym. Because when you go back, you'll be so discouraged that you've gone so far back. that you won't want to continue. So you're kind of taking emotional damage as well, which you don't want to do. Don't let ego get involved. I'll do a whole separate video on injuries and how to prevent injuries, how to rehab from injuries, sharing my story. So if you're into that, hit the subscribe button. But basically, you want to keep your ego in check and just focus on getting better than you of yesterday. Don't expect newbie gains to continue forever, because once you hit a certain level, unless you're using all these steroids and things, you're going to hit a plateau. It's a very natural thing, right? And it's going to take time to overcome it, and the gains are going to be slower and slower. Think of it kind of like this. You have fat and you have muscle. When you have a lot of fat and little muscle, you can build muscle and lose fat. You can trade fat to muscle in a pretty good ratio and pretty good speed. But as your fat goes down, there's not much to trade anymore. If you're someone that's starting out, you want to think of your dream physique, not in these like 30 days, 90 days. Forget all of that, guys. You want to think 1 year minimum, more realistically 2 years, and it's better to think that way, because then it becomes part of your lifestyle rather than some hobby that you try out. I hope these tips helped you. If you're a gym noob and you just understand some of these things that I said, and also apply some of the training principles and diet principles that I talked about in my talk about in a lot of my other videos, you are literally doing better than 95% of people that are in the gym. And that is not an exaggeration. Okay, and I don't mean to like blow my own horn or anything. It's just, you go to the gym and you see so many people just clueless. They don't have no understanding or system about it. So I mean, there's a lot of people that do, but there's a lot of people that don't. Some of the things that I mentioned are the most important things that's going to make sure that you start on the right track. See you in the next video, guys.